Hello and welcome to this episode of Hypnotist Burney's Exposition. Joining us tonight is Dr. Richard Hart. Hey Dr. Hart, how are you doing?
Okay, good to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see you. Dr. Hart is my mentor. He's my instructor for certified instructor in the year 2002. I've known him for like 9 years, 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, it's been a while.
Yes,
yeah.
We've had a good run.
Had a good run. Well, tell us, how did you got into the field of hypnotism?
Well, it's an interesting story how I became involved. This is postgraduate. Actually, it was post my undergraduate training.
Okay.
I was a college graduate, and I was sitting at a party once.
Right.
And I had been married. I got married at that time, young.
Right.
And my wife and I were sitting, Bernie, it was kind of an interesting thing. We were sitting in this living room.
Right.
And there was a hypnotist there.
Oh, yeah?
And the people in the room had been to Jamaica, and they'd been water skiing in Jamaica with this hypnotist.
Right.
And what happened was something really interesting. He said to me that, would you like to go there?
Right.
And I said, yes, I would like to go there.
Right.
And because I was just at this party, you know, we were just having a social party, and I'd never been there.
Right.
He came over to me and did something silly. I don't know what he did, something like this, these things. And I was very receptive at that point.
Right.
And I closed my eyes, and the next thing I know, I'm water skiing in the middle of a living room.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then he said to me something very interesting, the hypnotist.
Right.
He said to me, where is your wife?
Right.
And my wife was sitting on a couch, and she was pregnant at the time.
Right.
And I was looking right at her, and I said to him, not to her, I said to him, you know, she's back home in Washington. I lived in Washington at the time. Right. And he said, she's in Washington. I said, I'm looking right at her.
Right.
And then when he brought me out of hypnosis,
right.
Of course she was sitting there the whole time.
Right.
So I said, what was that about?
Right.
And he said to me, you were having a negative hallucination.
Oh, wow.
In other words, I saw her, but I didn't see her.
Right.
Which fascinated me.
Right.
At that point, I hired him.
Wow.
I hired him to train me.
Right.
And he trained me in self-hypnosis.
Right.
I was in the printing business at the time.
Right.
That was nothing to do with hypnosis. I was in the printing business.
Right, right.
And what he did, he hired me, and he said to me, during one of our sessions, he was teaching me self-hypnosis, he put on, at that time, they had records. We didn't. Right. They had records. You don't put on a record like a 90, what do they call it?
Right. Yeah, they're vinyl.
Yeah. And he turned, spinning wheel. In today's age, I don't know what if I said to my daughter, we had records, she said, what records? What? It sounded like I went to jail or something. So this Victrola was playing this record. And it had to be on for 15 or 20 minutes. When I came out of hypnosis, you'll never believe it, I almost verbatim repeated that record.
Oh, wow.
Now, this made an impact on me, and I started to think, how can I use this in my business?
Right.
Which I started to do in sales.
Oh, great.
That was my impact. I started to realize that I could be very persuasive using suggestion.
Right.
I started to understand. I said I had to start understanding what suggestion was about.
Right.
So suggestion became my mantra, so to speak. Right. I started to research everything about suggestion.
Right.
And suggestion management. In fact, as you know, I teach people how to work with suggestions and how you can use suggestion, whether it be indirect or direct suggestion in hypnosis. That's what I do.
Oh, great, great. How did you... So, after that, you went to graduate school, right?
Yes.
And you studied psychology?
Psychology, yes.
Okay. Did you use hypnosis? Or did you study hypnosis?
Yes, so I went then and trained with hypnosis, yes.
Right.
And my mentor, a man named Frank Shames, who's no longer alive, taught me a lot of things. And the interesting thing in graduate school was I got into a program at Long Island University.
Right.
And I spent my time, my courses were all given at Creedmoor Psychiatric Center. Okay. Which is a difficult place to take courses, but but it was interesting, it was fascinating. I was not a patient there, I was a student there.
On the record.
So I was, so I was in a program. I got an unusual program. Everybody already had their PhDs. I didn't have my PhD at that point, but I was doing my postgraduate work. So what happened is they were mostly researchers there, and what they were doing as researchers, very interesting. They worked with rats and pigeons.
Right, that's true. Yeah.
Right, little mice. So they were, and I, you know, I was as close to a Dr. Skinner, as I was a behaviorist really.
At the time, that was his prime of his publishing career, right?
Correct.
Skinner was
right. So it was kind of very interesting with Skinner, and it was very interesting. I was learning behavior.
Right.
So when I had a small private practice for working with people for smoking and for weight and things. So what they taught me was all the things they were doing with rats and pigeons. Right. And what I would do is I would take it and try them out with my clients at the time. And then I'd come back to them and I'd tell them what happened. They said, "Well, no, it only works on rats and pigeons. It doesn't work on people." So I said, give me more. And I learned a lot of things from these people who worked as researchers in that setting. And so then I went on and got my PhD in psychology. And from there, I was able to open a private practice in New York. And what happened is I took over Harry Aaron's. You may remember the name Harry Aaron's. He had a business in South Orange, New Jersey. And he was older. And I studied with him for a year. I didn't study. I trained with him for a year in teaching. And took over his business. This is in 1982. I took over his business. And then I moved it to New York City. And with it, I developed a teaching practice, but I adapted his program to what we do today, in that I took it and added a lot of graduate level material to it, so that I adapted it to what we have today as a curricula at the National Guild of Hypnotists. And I'm today educational director of the National Guild, which is in New Hampshire. And so basically I created a teaching practice. I went to Dr. Dwight Damon, who was president of the National Guild, and I said, "Listen, here's the problem." Again, I'm going back in time now, Bernie, to 1989. Now, I've been doing a lot of studies. I do, everything I do, I study. I do some research on. And I'd worked with sales training, I'd worked with smoking. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But I said to Dr. Damon in 1989, "Look, the problem with what's going on in the field of hypnosis today," I had a vision. My vision was, I had been president for a very short time of the Association to Advance Ethical Hypnosis. And I didn't like a lot of things that went on there at the time. But today, what I found out happening is, I said, we have to start sharing more with people in the world so everybody starts to speak the same language. That's what I had to do. And I said, let me write a curriculum that we could teach. You review it, see if it makes sense, and we will start to teach people with a new curricula, not everybody teaching something else. And this is the way it started. And when I did my first class, I had 20 students in 1990. But what I did, because I came from a business background, I had been in the business world for 20 years. I said, I have to do it this way. I have to create what we call a train-the-trainer program. What train-the-trainer means, I have to teach people whatever we're doing, and then I have to teach them how to train others with it. And that's how that evolved. It was the first one ever done in this here at this point. So the beauty of it was that first class I remember took place in New York City at my office. I had 20 students, and they went out. And today, if I can expand on this, tell you, today I've trained 1,100 instructors in 40 countries. Now my vision originally was, and even Dwight Damon said to me at the time, very interesting. He said, maybe we'll get a 5-year run out of this and see where it goes. So it's 20 years later today. And I would have to say, having trained 1,100 instructors, I have no idea how many people they've trained in this curriculum. That means I'm talking about from Taiwan to Singapore to Italy to just had a guy in my class from Tasmania, which is in Australia, which, I mean, he came a long distance.
It's the training that keeps on training.
So it had legs, clearly. And it's a basic course, by the way. The goal of this was not to make people into psychologists.
Right, that's true.
Or teach them that. It was to teach them how to work with a tool that we use, hypnosis.
Right.
How to understand hypnosis and suggestion.
Right.
So that people, and you know, if you ask me now my definition of hypnosis, I would say to you, I don't define hypnosis.
Okay.
The reason
That's
I don't.
not what the book says. So.
No, that was not my definition. The definition is Grolier Publishing.
Okay. Okay.
Grolier Publishing has a definition.
Okay.
But my definition of it, I wouldn't define it.
Okay.
I would tell you what it's like.
Okay.
And what it's like is very simple. There's a letting go process. Letting go means we get past our analytical, critical mind that gets in the way, which only then enables us to focus in on meaningful and helpful suggestions. So what's going on with people in hypnosis, unbeknownst to them because they don't think in these terms, is that they then become receptive. They develop a state of receptivity. So whether I give them suggestions that are going to help them, or they give themselves suggestions, because we teach people self-hypnosis, if they accept the suggestion in a receptive state, it's a pretty good chance they're going to carry it out.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? Because if you, go ahead.
I'll backtrack a little bit. Sure. How did you meet Harry Aarons?
How did I meet him? Oh, my mentor, Frank Shames, had introduced me to him, to Harry Aarons. And I immediately met him. He's not alive anymore, but he was a strange guy. He was a Russian person, really? Russian with a very authoritative tone. And sometimes I used to question how he did hypnosis because he was very authoritative. And he would do things to me, for example, very interesting in a class. I would teach with him. He'd let me teach part. And it's a good thing I was older. I was like 40 years old at this point. So I had been through, you know, my schooling and things. I was still going to school, but he would say things to me if I said something wrong in front of a class. He'd have 100 doctors in the room, or psychologists, and professors, and he would say, "Stop!" So at one point he said, "Dumb cough." I remember he would actually, you know, and if I was younger, I might have been, you know, he would do something like that. And then when he did that, of course, everybody felt sorry for me. So they, you know, when they come over, oh, yeah, we do it. But you know, through that crazy process, he really wasn't trying to teach me. I eventually took over his business. That's how that happened.
Great. How do you see the guild was different today than when you first approached Dwight Damon?
Well, the Guild, the National Guild of Hypnotists, has approximately 12,000 members in 60 countries today.
Wow.
So this program, the train-to-trainer program, or the instructor level program, became the feeder for new students all over the world. And what's different is the Guild is eclectic. The difference between that and all the other organizations that existed, everything was secret in those days. So what Harry Aarons taught, or William Bryan, or any of these old-timers taught, was theirs. They wouldn't share anything. You ask them a question, they say, go like this. But they were not clinicians either. They were really, none of them were clinicians. Harry Aarons was a stage hypnotist.
Was he?
Originally in New Jersey. So the laws were different at that time because even in Florida, for example, there were laws that hypnosis were in the books as voodoo or witchcraft. And the people who had, and I understand it on some level, they had to change. There's a guy, Joe McCauley is a good friend of mine. Joe McCauley knew Harry Aarons very well. He's about 80, Joe, now, and he lives in Orlando, Florida, or Tampa or something. And Joe had to overcome that. So what he did was he would only work under a doctor's referral. So as long as he's working under a doctor's referral, he could do hypnosis. You see? That's what took place in those days. It's changed somewhat now, obviously. We've had a lot of good press. The shows do it. It's a wonderful tool. The AMA recognizes it. So it's, you know, today I work, for example, with cancer patients. I work with ALS patients. I work with I mean,
how does the guild change, do you think, since the first time you have come across?
Well, there's in two ways, I think, two or more ways. First of all, we have a basic curricula. They didn't have a basic curricula. Okay. So we have people who started to study.
What was it like it back then?
Well, in 1989, it was much smaller. I mean, I think maybe we had 1,000 members or under 1,000 members. So the membership was small. Also, Dr. Damon is a chiropractor, so he's a professional. Right. Okay. He had a vision that the guild should become a profession. It was not a profession at that point. Okay. And today, he calls it, we have a distinct profession. Right. I mean, we have a lot of clout now. We even have in the United States a union representative, the AFL-CIO, where members belong to the union. We have in our midst right now, which we didn't have then, many psychiatrists, many psychologists, social workers, physicians who are members of the guild, and it's really a eclectic organization. We're sharing of ideas. So I look at this conference we're having now. We have 200 presenters on everything from nutrition to weight loss to you name it, to how to get into this profession. How do we teach? Right. Yeah. I mean, it's big today. I mean, we're recognized. The American Psychological Association recognizes us. Everybody understands who we are now. Right. And we're doing a good job. We're helping the world in many different ways. And most of the people in this field are short-term. They're doing short-term work. Right. So if somebody wants to lose weight, they don't have to come for a year and a half. Right. What is the most memorable client that you have? Or most memorable client? Well, interesting. I just thought of one. Well, I've had so many clients over the year, thousands of clients. I had a client once, years ago, and this is not typical. Right. Okay. Okay, but this does happen because there's so much neurosis in this world that this woman came to me. She happened to be a DuPont heiress. Okay. And she came to me for fear of driving. Okay. So I'd work a lot with fear of flying, so I understood how to work with her. So I use a technique called, I use hypnosis and systematic desensitization as a way of working. Right. And she came to me and told me her life story, and I helped her with the fear of driving. Right. But I didn't know at that time what she did at that time. She then took that and she developed a fear of flying. Right. So now I was working with her for a fear of flying. Right. When we helped her get on a plane, fear of flying, she had a fear of flying on big planes and small planes. She developed a fear of flying on small planes. Right. Okay. And it was like a circle. Right. And she came back to a fear of driving. Okay. she constantly. Right. But I found out through this process that she had her, just like she had a hairdresser. Right. She had her nurse. She had a lot of money. Right. She had her exercise physiologist. Right, right. She had a physician here. She had a psychologist here. Right. And I was just one in a link. Right. I didn't know this of this whole thing. Right. It was like a revolving door. she, and the interesting part about her, as a professional in the field, is I learned something. She had a lot of money. Right. I was charging her $60 at the time, Bernie. Right. Okay. And I remember I should have been paying her because her stories were so fascinating. Right. To give me our money. So I once attempted to raise the price. I said, my fees are going up. She said, well, I remember her looking at me. Right. Don't you ever raise the price on me. And she frightened me, so I never raised the price on her. So that was a memorable client. Because now, I charge $250 an hour. Wow, but this was $60, and she wouldn't budge an inch. So I had a good time with her, and I enjoyed her experience. I helped her son and all that, but basically that was a memorable. But I had several. Okay. One I think was good. It was a man years ago. He's not alive anymore, but he was president of, at that time, Burberry. Okay. And he came to me. He had ALS. Right. Okay. Lou Gehrig's disease. Yes. And he came to me. He was still president of Burberry.
Right.
And he had a chauffeur who drove him to my office. And he had, at that point, he was walking with a cane.
Right.
He'd been, I think he had it for about a year.
Right.
Now, a person with ALS usually has a prognosis of approximately 5 years.
Right.
And there's no cure, obviously, for that.
Yes.
And what happened with him, we developed a tremendous rapport, and it's a very interesting story. Do we have time to tell this story?
Yes, go for it. Yeah.
It was a very interesting case. He is a man about 55 years old. He had grandchildren at the time. His kids were married, some of them. A very successful man, very bright. Wonderful ability to use imagery, which I had determined through some testing that I do.
Right.
I'll explain that as we go along.
Right.
And he, when he came to me, he was still speaking normally, and and then his nervous system started to change. As we worked together, he was, started to talk like this. But I was trying to figure out a way, because of his imagery, how can I help him recreate his nervous system, because they were dying, basically, so to speak. And we together developed a plan that he could, because he was an artist, he painted, that he could go home and develop scripts for himself, or imagery, almost like, if I would say imagery, like, when I work with cancer patients, sometimes I'll have them imagine a shark eating a clam.
Okay.
And that's the clam is the cancer cell. So we're destroying the cancer cells. So I knew that, having read, I forget the name of the book I read, but do you know that book, Getting Well Again, by Simonton.
Yes.
And those of you, by the way, that care to should read this book. It's a little paperback book called Getting Well Again. If any of you work with or know cancer patients, they should, your audience should know to read that book, because it teaches you what you have to do to survive.
Right.
And it's a wonderful book.
Right.
But anyway, I worked with him and developed this concept that here's the way we're going to work. We're going to create this, and you're going to draw it.
Right.
And you're going to go home. And I taught him self-hypnosis. He's going to hypnotize himself and allow his nervous system to develop and grow, almost like having a tree and letting the branches start growing again by watering it.
Right.
We started to work with his nervous system under hypnosis.
Right.
Okay.
How's that?
Well, no, this is a while ago now. The man died, but he lived 8 years.
Oh, wow.
8 years doing this. In fact, he developed, his wife, they had some money, so he developed a walk, which still exists in New York City, where they have a walk each year raising money for ALS.
Oh, wow.
But I worked with him, and there was a real affinity that developed with he and I.
Okay.
I'm going to have hundreds of cases like this I can talk about that are fascinating when you start to see the development of using hypnosis as a means of, it's almost like he was able to, I do demonstrations with automatic writing.
Right.
Sometimes people cannot verbalize repressed material.
Right.
Oh, the interesting part of that story was this. Oh, I forgot to tell you the most interesting. When this guy grew up, his father, he had a brother, but his father thought he was a sissy. Okay. A sissy meaning somebody who was somewhat effeminate at that time. Okay. Like he would throw a ball like this instead of that. So he favored the brother.
Right. Okay.
Years ago, you're too young for this, but years ago there was a movie called The Lou Gehrig Story.
I think I have.
I don't know if you ever saw it or not, but the Lou Gehrig story was about Lou Gehrig and how he developed the disease. Right. His father took him to see this story.
Right.
The movie. Right. Both brothers.
Right.
He hated his father for his father thinking of him this way.
Okay.
He said to himself, it's very interesting, at that time, I'm going to get that disease to punish my father.
Oh.
He told me this under hypnosis.
Wow.
So I'm thinking, my God, what a powerful thing. Think of that.
Wow.
I'm going to contact, he's a kid.
Wow.
he comes out of hypnosis, and the first thing I said to him, because now he's an adult, and he has the disease, I said, he was 17 at the time, he told me. I said, that contract is broken, you were underage. I told him, I said to him, there's no way that's a legal contract. You can get rid of that disease right now. That's the first thing that came to my mind. It was like, in the moment, it was a very instinctive thing. But it's true, he was underage. He made an agreement. And he had told me then, his father was dead at the time when I was seeing him, but he said he worked things through. But clearly he hadn't worked things through on that level. And you know the old story that sometimes you get what you wish for? He got it.
Wow.
That was so, you talk about suggestion? Look how powerful that was. 17, and now he's 55, and he contacts the disease.
Wow.
That is weird. That blew my mind.
You can't make this up.
No, you can't. You can't make it up. So it was a powerful story. Okay.
What's the craziest student you ever got?
Student?
Yeah.
Besides you?
What's the second craziest student you ever got?
Student? The craziest student. Tell me when you talk about crazy.
Or like, memorable in a outrageous way.
In an outrageous way. Crazy student. Trying to think of somebody who would have done that. I don't like to use the word crazy.
Okay. Not in a clinical sense.
People play with hypnosis sometimes, and they do things that I shudder with. For example, I'm not a great believer myself in past life regression. Even though I've been past life regressed 4 times. And when I say I'm not a believer, I don't like, especially when people are not trained. There's a tendency sometimes for people who want to become analysts, and they always think you have to find the precipitating event. So people do things like that. I don't know that I've had people who. I can't truthfully say to you. I have I mean, you're probably one of the wildest students. I mean, who's taken it though in a very interesting way. But I really can't tell you anything. I mean, I've trained thousands of students.
So you have all normal.
Well, I have people who are more inventive and creative, who do like you do, who take hypnosis to different levels, which it makes me very proud that people do that. So I mean, I've had a lot of episodes in class. I mean, I had.
Maybe that would be a better question. Like, what's the most memorable episodes?
Yeah, I mean, I've had all kinds of things because I've done regression with people. I'll tell you one thing. I will tell you something that kind of taught me a lot. That would help me. I had a student come from Italy. A woman, her name was, I won't use her name, but and she was with a guy who's a psychologist in Italy. And they do things, when they teach in Italy, they lecture a lot. There's not a lot of interaction that goes on. But this guy developed a concept over there, which they hired me to Americanize. And it was called the Benemelio technique. Benemelio was the psychologist over there. And it dealt a lot with understanding symbolism. And how one sits, as like, for example, you're sitting now with your hand like this, and it comes from China really, a long time ago. You could be a pole, a triangle, or a circle. A pole representing a father, and a triangle representing a mother, and a circle is through life experience you do. So body language tells us a lot. What this meant for me is that I could do things. I do a lot of things, Barney. I think you know I do a lot of things. I do corporate consulting. I take my psychology and business concept back, and I act as, for example, a guru to CEOs of major corporations.
Right.
Right. I've trained at Motorola. I've trained at Estee Lauder. I've trained at Mutual Benefit Life and Merrill Lynch, and that's something that I did for many years. And I teach, and I have a private practice. That's how I've made my life work. I'll come to something later, but when I did my graduate work, I learned my dissertation was imagination qua persistence, meaning imagination and persistence are the same thing.
Okay.
You want me to go on with that?
Right.
Okay. I'm suggesting, my hypothesis was that if people have a vivid imagination, they have the potential, that's key word, potential to persist for longer periods of time at agreed upon tasks. Agreed upon, they have to agree. That's why in companies today, lots of work doesn't get done because the people who are doing it don't agree with management to do them, so they sabotage it in some way or form, and they don't get it done. That's the difference. But if you have an agreed upon task, you see, I'm saying if you have a vivid imagination, and I designed a test that measures this, and at some point during my research, I took a leap. I said if I was trying to find out how people follow suggestions.
On that note, we need to take a break. We'll be right back.